The Unpaid Ledger, Episode 1, The Inheritance, Chapter 1. The building came down about 4 hours ahead of schedule. I stood across the street, hands in my pockets, watching dust roll out through the chain-link fence like it was trying to escape. Somewhere behind the cloud, 3 stories of condemned brick and rotten timber had just become a very expensive pile of rubble. The demolition crew wouldn't show up until tomorrow morning. They were going to have questions. Not my problem. Kevin Marsh, 28, IT specialist, was walking away shaky but alive. That made him my last problem of the day. Also, my only win. That was supposed to happen, right? Eddie stood next to me, arms crossed, watching the dust settle. The building just doing that. On its own. Totally normal. Totally normal. I agreed. And we're not going to talk about it. Nothing to talk about. I fished a cigarette out of my coat pocket. I don't smoke. I just like having something to do with my hands after a job goes sideways. Building was condemned. Now it's down. City saves money on demolition. Everybody wins. Except whoever owned the building. Insurance? I said. And the guys who were going to get paid to knock it down. They'll find other work. Eddie turned to look at me. He's been dead for 7 years, give or take, and he still manages to look disappointed. It's a talent. You know what I'm going to say, he said. That this was messy, that I cut it too close, that one of these days the math isn't going to work out and something worse than a building is going to pay the price. I was going to say you look tired, but yeah, that too. I put the cigarette back in my pocket. Across the street, Kevin Marsh was staring at the rubble like he couldn't quite believe any of this had happened. 20 minutes ago, he'd been holding a pocket watch that wanted to kill him. Now, he was just a guy with a wild story nobody would ever believe. Lucky guy. But let me back up. It started about 9 hours earlier, with a guy, a pocket watch, and the question I always ask when someone finds their way to my office. Who gave you my name? 9 hours earlier, my office was doing its best impression of a place where dreams go to file for bankruptcy. 3rd floor of the Marsh building on Caldwell. No relation to Kevin, just one of those coincidences the universe likes to throw around. The elevator hadn't worked since the Clinton administration. The hallway smelled like old coffee and older carpet, and my name on the door was still spelled Vince because I'd never gotten around to arguing with the building manager about it. Inside wasn't much better. A desk I'd inherited from the previous tenant, 2 chairs for clients, a filing cabinet I mostly used to hold up a lamp with a bad leg, and a window that looked out on the brick wall of the building next door. Atmosphere. Eddie was sprawled in the corner chair, pretending to read a newspaper. He can't actually turn the pages without concentrating, so it was mostly for show. He likes to look busy when clients come in. Gives him something to do besides stand around being dead. The knock came at 9:47 a.m. The knock reminded me of someone who wasn't sure they wanted to be here. It's open, I called. Kevin Marsh walked in like he expected the floor to collapse under him. Late 20s, button-down shirt, khakis, sensible shoes. The kind of guy who files his taxes early and apologizes when other people bump into him. He looked tired. Dark circles under his eyes, a healing scrape on his forehead, and the faint hunch of someone who'd spent the last few weeks flinching at shadows. Mr. Vance? That's what the door says, more or less. I gestured to the client chair. Sit. You want coffee? I should warn you, it's terrible. No, no, thank you. He sat, perched on the edge like he might need to run. His hands were in his lap, and I noticed he was holding something. Small, metallic, catching the light from my one sad window. Eddie looked up from his newspaper. His expression didn't change, but I'd known him long enough to read the shift. Something about this guy, or something he was carrying, had Eddie's attention. That was rarely good news. So, I said, settling back in my chair. Who gave you my name? My cousin's girlfriend's brother, Kevin said. He told me you help people with unusual problems. That's one way to put it. I kept my voice neutral. Referral chains that long usually meant the person at the end had already tried everything normal. What kind of unusual are we talking about? Kevin laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're going to think I'm crazy. Try me. He took a breath. Let it out. Then he started talking. 3 weeks ago, his Uncle Ray died. Heart attack, very sudden, no warning. Kevin hadn't been close to him, but he was the only family left, so he'd handled the estate. There wasn't much. A small apartment full of old books, some furniture nobody wanted, and a pocket watch. He left it to me specifically, Kevin said, in the will. Everything else just said dispose as needed, but the watch had my name on it. I thought it was sentimental. Maybe it belonged to my grandfather or something. But ever since I took it home, my life has been falling apart. He rattled off the list. Car sideswiped. Stairs that betrayed him. Electrical fire. Girlfriend gone. Shelf at work that nearly took his head off. A dozen smaller things. Food going bad overnight. Phone dying at full charge. A bike messenger missing him by inches. 3 weeks, he said. 3 weeks of everything going wrong. I don't believe in curses, Mr. Vance. I'm an IT guy. I believe in systems and logic and things that make sense. But this doesn't make sense. And the only thing that changed is this. He held up the watch. It was old. Silver case. Tarnished, but not ruined. The kind of thing you'd find in an antique shop and think about buying for your dad before deciding it was too expensive. Nothing special to look at. But when I reached out to take it, Eddie stood up so fast his newspaper scattered across the floor. Sam, his voice was tight. Don't. I stopped, hands still extended. Kevin looked between us, confused. He couldn't see Eddie unless Eddie wanted to be seen. So from his perspective, I'd just frozen mid-reach for no reason. 1 second, I said to Kevin. Then, quieter to Eddie. Talk to me. That thing is loaded, Eddie said. I can feel it from here. It's like standing next to a dam with cracks in it. I looked at the watch, looked at Kevin, who was holding it like it was just metal and glass and tiny gears. Mother of pearl. Kevin, I said slowly, what exactly did your uncle do for a living? He was retired. Before that, accounting, I think. Kevin frowned. Why? Accounting. Of course. I'm going to need to make a phone call, I said. And you're going to need to put that watch down, gently, on the desk. And then I'm going to need you to step away from it. What? Why? Eddie and I exchanged a look. Because your uncle left you a lot more than a family heirloom. Chapter 2. I sent Kevin to a coffee shop 2 blocks over. Told him to sit in the middle of the room, stay around people, and not touch anything metal until I called him. He didn't argue. That's the thing about skeptics who've had 3 weeks of impossible bad luck. They're ready to try anything, even listening to a guy whose office smells like mildew and broken dreams. Once he was gone, I turned to Eddie. All right, what are we dealing with? Eddie hadn't moved from his spot near the wall, as far from the desk as he could get without leaving the room. The watch sat where Kevin had placed it, looking perfectly innocent. Just an old timepiece on a scratched wooden surface. It's a container, Eddie said. Someone's been stuffing costs into it. A lot of costs, over a long time. How long? Years, maybe. Decades. He shook his head. It's packed tight, Sam. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. The seals are good. Were good. But the guy who made them is dead now, and without him maintaining it. It's leaking. Worse, it's cracking. I can feel the pressure. It's like a balloon that someone keeps blowing into. Eventually, he didn't need to finish. I'd seen what happened when stored costs released all at once. It wasn't pretty. And if Kevin was the nearest living relative, the nearest anchor point, we need to know what's inside, I said. You need Marcus. I looked at the watch, looked at Eddie. Yeah, I said. I need Marcus. Second Chances sat on the corner of Alcott and Pine, sandwiched between a nail salon and a place that claimed to sell vitamins but definitely didn't. The sign out front was hand-painted, faded to the point of illegibility, and the window display hadn't changed since I'd first walked in 8 years ago. A stuffed owl, a brass telescope, and a ceramic cat with one ear missing. Marcus Bell believed in consistency. The bell above the door chimed when I walked in, and the smell hit me immediately. Old wood, older dust, and something underneath that most people couldn't identify, but I recognized instantly. Residue. The faint tang of cost that had been stored and moved and traded so many times they'd left a permanent stain on the air. Samuel. Marcus's voice came from somewhere in the back, behind shelves packed with objects that ranged from mundane to extremely not. I was wondering when you'd darken my door again. He emerged from the shadows like he'd been waiting for a cue. Mid-60s, dark skin gone gray at the temples, wearing a burgundy vest over a crisp white shirt that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Marcus dressed like every day was a jazz club in 1962, and he was expecting to be photographed. Marcus, I held up the bag I'd put the watch in. Plain canvas, nothing special. I need your eyes on something. My eyes don't come cheap, young man. They never do. He smiled at that, gold tooth catching the light from a lamp that shouldn't have been bright enough to catch anything. Then he gestured to a table near the back, cleared of everything except a velvet cloth. Show me. I set the bag down, opened it, and carefully tipped the watch onto the velvet. I didn't touch it with my bare hands. Not yet. Marcus leaned in. His smile faded. Where did you get this? Client inherited it from his uncle. His uncle? Marcus straightened up, and for the first time in years, I saw something on his face I didn't recognize. It might have been fear. Did his uncle happen to be Raymond Marsh? Mother of pearl. You knew him? Knew him. Didn't like him. Warned him once. Marcus moved around the table, studying the watch from different angles without getting any closer. Raymond Marsh was an adjuster. Competent if you were feeling generous. Reckless if you weren't. What did you warn him about? This. Marcus gestured at the watch. Storage vessels are delicate things, Sam. You don't just stuff costs into them like clothes in a suitcase. There's an art to it, a balance. You have to maintain them, bleed off pressure, rotate the contents, and Ray didn't do that. Ray treated this watch like a savings account he never planned to withdraw from. Just kept depositing, year after year. Costs he couldn't place. Costs he shouldn't have taken. Costs that... Marcus trailed off, frowning. Costs that what? There are rumors. He said it carefully, the way you say something you don't want to be true. Jobs Raymond took near the end. People who wanted things moved that shouldn't be moved. Consequences that belonged to people who could afford to pay a great deal to avoid them. I thought about Kevin, with his sensible shoes and his IT job and his life falling apart around him. Thought about him sitting in a coffee shop right now, surrounded by strangers, hoping that was enough to keep the universe from noticing him. What's inside the watch, Marcus? I don't know, and I'm not opening it to find out. He looked at me, and there was no humor in his eyes now. What I do know is that it's failing. The seals are degrading. If I had to guess, I'd say Raymond's death accelerated it. He was the anchor, the constant. Without him, it's just pressure looking for an exit. How long? Marcus considered the watch. Hours. Maybe a day if you're lucky. When it goes, everything inside comes out at once, and it will land on the nearest viable target. The nephew. The nephew. Marcus nodded. Unless you find somewhere else for it to land. I stared at the watch. An old man's savings account, full of other people's pain. And now, it was my problem. Can you hold it? Slow it down? I can try. But Sam, Marcus met my eyes. Whatever's in there, it's heavy. Heavier than anything I've held in a long time. You're going to need somewhere big for it to land. Somewhere that can take the hit. Any suggestions? Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's your department, young man. I just mind the shop. Chapter 3. I left the watch with Marcus. He didn't like it, but he had containment options I didn't, and every minute that thing sat in my coat pocket was a minute it could crack open and ruin someone's day. Probably mine. Outside, the afternoon sun was doing its best to pretend Ashford was a nice place to live. Eddie fell into step beside me, invisible to everyone else on the sidewalk. So, he said, we've got a time bomb full of mystery costs, a debt adjuster with a bad reputation, and a nephew who's about to become the universe's favorite punching bag. What's the plan? We need to know what Ray was into, who he worked for, what kind of costs he was hiding. His apartment. His apartment. I nodded. You up for some scouting? Eddie gave me a look. You mean, am I up for walking through walls and digging through a dead man's things while you sit in a coffee shop? I was going to check on Kevin. Sure you were. Someone has to make sure he doesn't get hit by a bus before we can save him. Eddie sighed, which was impressive for a guy who didn't technically breathe. Fine, give me the address, but you're buying me a drink after this. You can't drink. I can hold the glass. It's about the principle. I gave him Ray's address from the file Kevin had left with me. Eddie nodded once, then faded out, heading north. I turned south toward the coffee shop and tried not to think about how many hours we had left. Eddie called me 40 minutes later. I don't know how he does it. Something about payphones and willpower. I've learned not to ask. It's bad, Sam. I stepped away from the coffee shop window, keeping Kevin in sight while I listened. He was still at his table, nursing a cup of something he hadn't touched. So far, nothing had exploded. Define bad. Raymond Marsh wasn't just reckless. He was dirty. Eddie's voice was flat, the way it got when he was angry and trying not to show it. I found his records, ledgers, client lists, the whole operation. He kept everything. Probably thought it was insurance. What kind of clients? The kind who don't want to face consequences. A real estate developer whose building collapse killed 3 workers. A surgeon who botched an operation on a senator's kid. A company that dumped chemicals in the river and didn't want the cancer cluster landing on their balance sheet. Eddie paused. These aren't small costs, Sam. These are deaths, diseases, ruined lives. And Ray just stuffed them in a watch and pretended they didn't exist. I leaned against the brick wall outside the coffee shop, feeling the weight of it settle on me. He was supposed to place them. That's the job. Yeah, well, he didn't. Near as I can tell, he took the money, made a show of moving the costs, and then just stored them indefinitely. Told the clients the balance was settled. And they believed him? Would you check? If you paid someone to make your problems disappear, would you go looking to make sure they actually disappeared? Or would you just be grateful you couldn't feel them anymore? He had a point. That was the thing about the ledger. Most people couldn't sense it directly. They just knew when things felt heavy and when they felt light. Ray could have run this scam for decades, and no one would know until he died. And the watch started cracking. Books and blood, I muttered. We're not just cleaning up his mess. We're cleaning up years of other people's messes that he promised to handle. Gets better, Eddie said. I found something else. A name in his most recent files. Someone he was working with, or working for. Who? Someone called Aldrich. No first name, no details. Just payments received and a note that said A will handle placement. Except there's no record of any placement ever happening. Aldrich. The name meant nothing to me, but it would mean something to someone. Get back here, I said. We need to. That's when the window behind me shattered. I spun around in time to see Kevin stumble backward, coffee spraying across the floor. A car had jumped the curb, plowed through a newspaper stand, and punched through the coffee shop's front window. The driver was slumped over the wheel, unconscious or worse. The car had stopped 3 feet from Kevin's table. People were screaming, running, doing all the things people do when the world stops making sense. I pushed through the door, glass crunching under my boots, and grabbed Kevin by the arm. Time to go. What? The car just. I know. Come on. I hauled him toward the back, past the counter, past a barista who was too shocked to stop us. There was an emergency exit by the bathrooms. I hit the push bar and dragged Kevin into the alley behind the building. Mr. Vance, what is happening? The watch is happening. I checked the alley left and right. Nothing yet. It's getting worse, faster than we thought. But I don't have it anymore. You took it. Doesn't matter. You're still connected. You're the air, the anchor point. Until we discharge it properly, the costs are going to keep trying to land on you. Kevin's face was pale. That car almost killed me. Yeah. And the driver? I didn't answer. I didn't want to think about the driver. Whoever they were, They just become collateral damage in a dead man's unpaid debts. The ledger didn't care about innocent bystanders. It just wanted balance. Eddie materialized beside us, solid enough for me to see the concern on his face. Sam, that was just the leak. When the whole thing goes. I know. Kevin looked between us, seeing Eddie for the first time. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Who? What? Explanations later. I started walking, pulling Kevin with me. Right now, we need to find somewhere big enough to absorb 30 years of hidden costs, and we need to find it fast. How fast? As if in answer, somewhere back in the coffee shop, I heard another crash, then another. The sounds of a building starting to come apart, piece by piece. Very fast, I said. Very, very fast. Chapter 4. We moved fast, staying off main streets. Eddie scouted ahead, phasing through walls to check intersections before we crossed. Kevin stumbled along beside me, shell-shocked, but mobile. I don't understand any of this, he said. That's probably healthy. My uncle was some kind of wizard? Adjuster? We don't like the W word. Too many connotations. I pulled him around a corner into a narrow alley that cut between two brick warehouses. Your uncle moved consequences for a living. When someone wanted to avoid paying for their choices, he made sure the bill landed somewhere else. That's possible? Everything has a cost. The ledger always balances. The only question is who pays and when. I checked the alley exit. Clear. Your uncle found a way to delay payment. Indefinitely, he thought. He was wrong. And now I'm paying for it. Not if I can help it. Kevin was quiet for a moment. Then, the guy who appeared in the alley. Eddie. What is he? I glanced at Eddie, who was walking on my other side. He shrugged. He's complicated, I said. Is he dead? That's also complicated. That's not an answer. No, I agreed. It's not. We kept moving. Behind us, I could hear sirens. The coffee shop, probably. Emergency services responding to a car through a window. They'd find the driver. They'd find the damage. They wouldn't find any explanation that made sense. That was the thing about the ledger. It operated underneath the world most people saw. They felt the effects, but they never saw the cause. Lucky them. I found a payphone outside a laundromat. Yes, they still exist. No, I don't know why. I dialed Marcus's shop and waited. He picked up on the first ring. It's getting worse. No greeting, no preamble. Marcus sounded strained in a way I'd never heard before. The seals are failing faster than I anticipated. I've got it in a containment circle, but it's fighting me, Sam. Whatever's inside wants out. How long? An hour. Maybe less. Mother of pearl. I'm working on a target. Work faster. There was a sound in the background, something between a crack and a groan. I can feel it pushing. 30 years of costs, all compressed into a space the size of a fist. When this goes, it's not going to be subtle. Can you bring it to me? Moving, it would accelerate the breakdown. You need to come here, take it, and go directly to wherever you're planning to land this. No stops, no delays. Understood. Sam. Marcus's voice dropped. Be careful. I've handled a lot of ugly things in my time. This is one of the ugliest. He hung up. I stood at the payphone, receiver still in my hand, thinking. An hour. Maybe less. I needed somewhere big, somewhere empty, somewhere that could absorb 3 decades of death and disease and disaster without hurting anyone else. And then I remembered. The Belmont Furniture Factory had been closed for 12 years. It sat on the edge of the old industrial district, a hulking 3-story monument to economic decline. The windows were boarded. The fence was wrapped in chain link and warnings. And according to the notice I'd seen last week, it was scheduled for demolition tomorrow morning. Perfect. There. I pointed at the building from across the street. That's our target. Kevin stared at it. A factory? Condemned? Empty. Already set to come down. I started toward the fence. Big enough to absorb what's in the watch. Isolated enough that when it goes, nobody gets hurt. When it goes, the costs have to land somewhere, Kevin. That's the rule. I can't make them disappear. I can only choose where they end up. And I'm choosing a building that's already dead. Eddie appeared beside us, frowning at the factory. You sure about this? That's a lot of weight to drop all at once. You have a better idea? No, just, he shook his head. This is going to be loud. People will notice. People will notice a building that was scheduled for demolition came down a few hours early. They'll chalk it up to structural failure. Happens all the time with old factories. And if it doesn't work? If the building can't hold it all? I didn't have a good answer for that. The truth was, I didn't know exactly what was in that watch. Marcus said it was heavy. Eddie said it was packed. 30 years of cost from clients who could afford to pay a lot to avoid their consequences. If the building couldn't contain it, the overflow would have to go somewhere. And the nearest anchor point was still Kevin. It'll work, I said, with more confidence than I felt. Let's get the watch. Kevin grabbed my arm. Wait, before we do this, I need to know something. Make it fast. My uncle. Kevin's eyes were searching my face. Was he a bad person? All that stuff about taking money to hide other people's consequences. The deaths, the diseases. Did he know what he was doing? I looked at this kid. 28 years old, IT specialist, guy who'd never asked for any of this. He just wanted to know if the uncle who'd left him a pocket watch was a monster. I didn't know him, I said, but based on what we found, yeah, he knew. He just didn't care. Kevin nodded slowly. Something shifted in his face. Grief, maybe, or the death of whatever good memories he'd been holding on to. Okay, he said. Let's end this. Chapter 5. Marcus was waiting at the door when we arrived. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. His vest was rumpled, his shirt untucked, and there was sweat on his forehead. In 8 years, I'd never seen Marcus sweat. Take it. He thrust the canvas bag at me before I'd even crossed the threshold. Take it and go. Now. I took it. Even through the canvas, I could feel the pressure, like holding a bag full of wasps, all of them angry, all of them looking for something to sting. That bad? Worse. Marcus stepped back, putting distance between himself and the bag. The containment circle bought you time, but it cost me. I won't be able to work for a week. Maybe 2. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be fast. Him at my eyes. Whatever you're planning, do it now. That thing has minutes left, not hours. And Sam, yeah? Don't try to be clever. Don't try to siphon it off slowly. Open the floodgates and let it pour. All at once. It's the only way. I nodded. Kevin was waiting outside, Eddie beside him. I turned to go. Samuel. I stopped. Be careful what you feel when it passes through you. 30 years of hidden costs. That's a lot of pain. A lot of death. Don't let it stick. I won't. You say that. Marcus's voice was soft. But some things leave marks whether we want them to or not. I didn't have an answer for that. So I left. The fence wasn't hard to get through. Nothing a pair of bolt cutters couldn't handle, and I always kept a pair in the trunk of my car. Don't ask why. You don't want to know. Inside, the Belmont Furniture Factory was exactly what you'd expect from a building that had been empty for 12 years. Dust, debris, broken glass. The smell of rot and rust and forgotten things. Pigeons scattered as we walked in, their wings echoing in the empty space. This is creepy, Kevin said. It's private. That's what matters. I led him to the center of the ground floor where the old assembly line used to be. You stay here. Don't move. Don't touch anything. What are you going to do? My job. Eddie materialized beside me. Sam? You sure about this? No. I pulled the watch out of the bag. Even in the dim light, I could see the cracks now. Fine lines running across the silver case, like a frozen lake about to give way. But I'm out of better options. I walked to the nearest support column. Concrete and steel, one of the bones that held the building up. I pressed my palm against it. Cold. Solid. Real. When I start, it's going to get loud, I said, not turning around. The building is going to shake. Things are going to fall. Stay in the clear zone, and you'll be fine. And if I'm not in the clear zone, then I can't help you. I heard Kevin swallow. Okay, clear zone. Got it. Eddie drifted closer. I'll keep an eye on him. Thanks. I took a breath. Let it out. Here we go. I closed my eyes. The watch in my left hand. The building under my right. 2 points of contact. That's all it takes. Touch the source, touch the target, and push. I pushed. The first thing I felt was cold. Deep, bone-aching cold, like plunging into a frozen river. That was death. A lot of it. The workers who died in that building collapse. The patients who'd succumbed to a surgeon's mistake. The families poisoned by chemicals in their water. I let it flow through me. Didn't fight it. Didn't try to hold on. Just opened myself up and let the current carry the costs from the watch through me into the building. The factory groaned. I felt injury next. Broken bones, torn muscles, the sharp specific pain of bodies failing, car accidents, industrial mishaps, all the physical costs that Raymond Marsh had taken money to hide. The column under my hand started to crack. Then came the slower deaths. Cancer, organ failure, the long, grinding deterioration of people who never knew why they were sick. The watch had held it all, compressed and waiting, and now it was pouring out like water from a broken dam. The building shook. Somewhere above me, I heard glass shatter. Steel beams screamed as they twisted. Sam, Eddie's voice, distant, urgent. It's working, but you need to hurry. I pushed harder. Felt the watch growing lighter in my hand as decades of stored cost emptied into the structure around me. The factory was dying, taking on all the death and pain and consequence that Ray had been hiding. And then, just for a moment, something strange happened. I felt a gap, a space where cost should have landed, but didn't, like water hitting a drain and disappearing. Some of what flowed through me didn't make it to the building. It just stopped, went somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't see or sense. The watch cracked, then shattered, pieces of silver falling through my fingers like sand, and the building came down. I ran, pure instinct, no thought. Eddie grabbed Kevin and they were ahead of me, moving for the exit. The world was noise and dust and falling debris. Something hit my shoulder, spun me around. I kept running. We made it through the door just as the first floor collapsed behind us. I didn't stop until we were across the street, behind a concrete barrier, watching 3 stories of brick and steel fold in on themselves like a house of cards. The dust rose, the echoes faded, and then there was silence. Kevin was shaking. Eddie was staring at me. It's done, I said. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, distant. The watch is empty. You're clean. Kevin didn't respond. He just stared at the rubble, at the place where a building used to be. I looked down at my hand, the one that had held the watch. The skin was unmarked, but I could still feel it. The cold, the pain, the gap where something had gone missing. Eddie moved closer, spoke quietly so Kevin couldn't hear. Sam, when you were pushing, something happened. I know. The costs. Some of them didn't land. I know. Where did they go? I closed my hand into a fist, opened it again. I don't know, I said, but I'm going to find out. Chapter 6. We stood there for a while, the 3 of us, watching the dust drift across the empty lot where a building used to be. Sirens in the distance. Someone would come to investigate eventually. We needed to be gone before that happened. Kevin spoke first. Is it always like this? No. I brushed concrete dust off my coat. It didn't help much. Sometimes it's worse. He laughed. It was a broken sound, but it was a laugh. I don't know how to go back to my life after this. I work in IT. I fix printer problems. I just watched a building eat 30 years of death. You go back the same way everyone does, one day at a time. You tell yourself it was a gas leak, a structural failure, a weird week you'd rather not think about. I met his eyes. The world has a way of smoothing over the things that don't fit. Let it. And my uncle? Your uncle made choices. Bad ones. You're not responsible for them, and you don't have to carry them. I fished a card out of my pocket, one of the 300 I had left. If anything else strange happens, call me. But it shouldn't. You're clean now. The ledger has no claim on you. Kevin took the card, looked at it, looked at me. Thank you, Mr. Vance. Sam. Sam. He nodded. Then he turned and walked away, heading back toward the world he understood. The world of printer problems and sensible shoes and consequences that made sense. I hoped he'd make it. Most people did after something like this. They found ways to forget, to explain, to move on. But some didn't. Some couldn't stop looking at the cracks in reality once they'd seen them. I watched him go until he turned a corner and disappeared. That was quite a show. The voice came from behind me. I turned. A woman stood next to my car, arms folded, watching me with the kind of calm that suggested she'd been there a while. Late 30s, black, hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore a gray suit that probably cost more than my rent, and she carried herself like someone who was used to being in charge of whatever room she walked into. I didn't recognize her, but I recognized the pin on her lapel, a small silver scale, perfectly balanced. Auditor. Can I help you? Miriam Tate. She didn't offer her hand. I work for the Bureau of Equilibrium. I'm sure you've heard of us. Once or twice. I've been assigned to look into some irregularities in the Ashford area. Your name keeps coming up, Mr. Vance. I'm a popular guy. Apparently, she glanced at the rubble behind me. The Belmont factory. Scheduled for demolition tomorrow. Came down today. Structural failure, I'm sure the report will say. Old buildings. They do that. They do. Her eyes came back to me. Sharp. Assessing. And the pocket watch that belonged to Raymond Marsh? The one his nephew inherited? I don't suppose you know anything about that. Never heard of it. Of course not. Miriam smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Vance, I'm not here to cause you problems. I'm here to understand what's happening in this city. The balance has been off lately. Small discrepancies. Costs that don't land where they should. I'm sure it's nothing. I'm sure it is. But if it becomes something, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a card, and held it out. I'd appreciate a call. Professional courtesy. I took the card. It was blank, except for a phone number and the same small silver scale. I'll keep that in mind. Please do. She stepped away from my car, giving me room to leave. It was nice to meet you, Sam. I'm sure we'll talk again soon. She walked away without looking back. I watched her go. Eddie materialized beside me. That was bad. Yep, she knows something. She suspects something. There's a difference. I pocketed her card next to my own. Let's get out of here before anyone else shows up. The drive back to my office was quiet. Eddie rode in the passenger seat, visible only to me, staring out the window at a city that had no idea what had almost happened today. Finally, he spoke. You going to tell me what really happened in there? And where? The factory. When you were pushing. He turned to look at me. I've watched you work for 7 years, Sam. I know what it looks like when costs land. I know what it feels like. And back there, some of them didn't land. They just vanished. I kept my eyes on the road. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you do. Eddie's voice was quiet, not angry, worried. Where did they go, Sam? Where did the costs go when they don't land where they're supposed to? I didn't answer. I didn't have an answer. But I could still feel it. The gap. The place where something should have been and wasn't. Like a hole in the ledger where my name should have been written. Somewhere out there, 30 years of hidden cost had been paid. Most of them landed on a condemned building, but some of them had gone somewhere else. Somewhere I couldn't see or sense or find. And sooner or later, I was going to have to figure out where. The radio crackled. Static. Then a fragment of something that might have been music, then static again. I left it on. I always did. Sam, yeah? Whatever this is, you don't have to figure it out alone. I glanced at him. My debt, my partner, my friend. If the dead could have friends. I know, I said. But for now, let's just call it a win. Kevin Marsh is alive. The watch is gone. And nobody innocent got hurt. That we know of. That we know of, I agreed. The sun was setting over Ashford, painting the skyline in shades of orange and red. Somewhere out there, the ledger was turning its pages, tallying its costs, waiting for the next bill to come due. And somewhere out there, a woman named Miriam Tate was writing my name in a file. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, I'd saved a guy with a pocket watch. Today, a building nobody wanted had paid a debt it didn't owe. Today, the balance held. It wasn't much. But in my line of work, you take the wins where you can find them. They don't come often.